Hi, it's Steph and we're at Lowe's. It's a new month and they've received some new inventory. There are new shrubs and perennials as well as some spring annuals, and they even have some really great deals for their Spring Fest event. So let's go ahead and take a look at the April inventory at Lowe's. Lowe's just got a huge shipment of their Boston Ferns hanging baskets, and they're on a Spring Fest deal, 2 for $20 for these 1.5 gallon containers. That is a great price. Now, these usually get pretty root bound in these planters, so you'd want to put them into a new container with fresh potting soil, and they work really great in hanging baskets and in planters. And these Boston Ferns are better for a shady spot. So if you have shade, these are excellent. If you deal with more sun, you'd want to go for the Kimberly Queen Fern. There's also some differences in the style of the fern. So the Boston Fern, which likes more shade, has this more arching habit, where the Kimberly Queen, that can deal with more sun, has more of an upright habit. But what a great price on these 1.5 gallon hanging baskets, 2 for $20. Now, we are still getting some pretty cool temperatures, so if you bring these home, you'll want to protect them. If your temperatures drop too much, you can either bring them into a garage or up, a shed to protect them a little bit, or even just slip a pillowcase over them temporarily. But this is a great deal to pick them up at. Also have a Spring Fest deal on their 2-quart perennials in the Lowe's house brand containers, 2 for $8 or $4 each. And this one here, the Candy Tuft or Iberis, is one that I absolutely love. I use it in my containers in the spring every year, and then I plant them out in the landscape. They can take some pretty cold temperatures, and they are just so beautiful. Look at that. A great source of nectar for our pollinator friends early on in the season, and such a good price at $4 each for these 2-quart containers. Look at this cheerful little perennial. This almost looks like a daisy to me, but it's actually called Little Leo's Leopard's Bane, and it is a part sun perennial. Gets to be about 2 feet in height, 1 foot in width, and is hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. So very hardy, and would actually look really pretty paired in a perennial container for spring with some of this candy tuft and maybe even something in purple. I think that would look lovely. And look at this beautiful pink bloom. This is Dianthus, the Super Trooper Silver Pink Dianthus. Now, this variety of Dianthus has more of that bluish green foliage as opposed to the straight green that we see on some varieties. Dianthus is a very pretty, sort of like a dainty carnation type flower. Very easy to maintain. Once most of the blooms are spent, you could just kind of shear off the top and just leave this tuft of grass down below, and it will usually send out some more bloom buds. So this one here likes full sun. It's a mounding perennial, and let's see how big it gets. They're not very tall, probably 10 to 14 tall and wide. Yep, exactly that. So 10 to 14 inches tall and wide, and they're hardy down to a zone 6. These are also on the sale, 2 for $8, and that would look gorgeous with these yellow Leo's Bane flowers as well. And an excellent spring ground cover, creeping phlox. Now, this will spread pretty wide over time, super easy to divide and transplant. They look great planted on like a rock wall or a retaining wall, creeping downward. Very pretty, super low maintenance, drought tolerant. I have it by the side of the road where we get road salt when it snows, and they have been able to withstand those conditions with a lot of heat off of the hot pavement from the driveway and lots of sun, and they thrive. They're also pretty deer and rabbit resistant. Nothing seems to touch them. So they like full sun. They're hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and they get to be 4 to 6 inches in height, 12 to 14 inches in width. And these are also part of the sale, 2 for $8. They have the creeping phlox in several different colors. So they have that light purple we just looked at. They have some white, which is also really pretty. And they have this pinkish purple color down below here. Here's yet another variety of Dianthus. This one, the foliage is a lot more green, and it has this fuchsia magenta bloom, which is really pretty, and it has tons of buds on it. This one is called Beauty's Dianthus Hilarion. It likes full sun, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it gets to be 12 to 15 inches in height, 12 to 15 inches in width. On the top shelf here, they have some quart-sized Monrovia perennials, some Aquilegia or Columbine. That is what the bloom will look like. Now, these are not in bloom yet. They're still tightly budded, but we saw some of this variety at Home Depot last week. They're actually beautiful. You can kind of see the picture there. The pollinators love them. They like a part shade to shade garden, and even the foliage is really pretty. They're very hardy, usually down to like negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, low maintenance, and nothing seems to bother them in my garden, neither the deer nor the rabbits. So these are $5.98. These smell amazing. It is the Spanish lavender. They bloom in spring and in summer. They are perennial. Now, lavender is a Mediterranean plant, so it likes a very well-draining soil that leans dry, and they love lots of sun. This variety is actually really pretty. It's more unique and different than the ones that you see that have those spike-type blooms. These almost look like little pineapples to me with a fluff on top. This lavender is called the Lavanova Intense Purple Lavender, and it is hardy to a zone 5 or down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and it gets to be 20 inches in height and 24 inches in width, so pretty good size. This is Carex, or Japanese sedge, in the Evergold variety. It is variegated, so it's green and cream, so this is a great plant to add some texture and a pop of brightness to either a container or even in the landscape. It does like part sun, and let's see how large it gets. It's pretty compact, 16 by 16 in height and in width, and very hardy down to a zone 5 or negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Some beautiful evergreen shrubs. Now, I love evergreens here in the Northeast because when our garden is dormant, we still have some structure and some interest in the winter to look at. But this variety here, the Blue Star Juniper, is excellent for the front of the border because it stays relatively low growing. And it's also pretty slow growing. I've had about 3 or 4 of these in my garden for upwards of 12 years now, and it's only gotten to be 3 to 4 feet in width and only about 12 to 18 inches in height. And they're hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit or a zone 4. They're also deer resistant, and they have this gorgeous steely blue color, but it will have the best color in full sun. And you can see it is listed as full sun. And these are just under a gallon for $12.98, which is a great price. And they're easy to plant too because the root ball is fairly small. If you don't like to mulch, but you still need to suppress weeds, or maybe you have an area that's difficult to mow because it's hilly, an evergreen ground cover is a great alternative. I planted several of these blue rug junipers about 3 years ago, and they are spreading beautifully to cover a hillside area of my garden. Now, this only gets to be about 12 inches in height, so 1 foot in height, but it spreads horizontally outward about 8 feet, which is excellent. And they're pretty fast growing. So in 3 years, mine have stretched probably about 4 feet by now. And they are hardy down to zone 3 or negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And I can definitely vouch that they are deer resistant because in general, deer do not like junipers, but I have this in an area where we get lots of deer and they've never touched them. They're also water wise, which means they're drought tolerant because junipers thrive on very little water after they're established. So this is an excellent ground cover. And because it's evergreen, it'll look that way all year round. It likes full sun. It does get a little bit more of a blue tint to it as we get into the summer, but currently it's still cool out, so there's still a little more green. But this is a great one, $11.98 for these. And if you like the look of a round evergreen, something like a boxwood, but you don't want to have the work of having to prune it that way, well, here's a good option. This is the Mr. Bowling Ball Arborvitae. It grows in a sphere or ball shape. It is $16.98 for this one. They do like full sun, and it gets to be about 24 to 30 inches in height, 24 to 30 inches in width, and very hardy down to a zone 3 or negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Another one of my favorites, the lemon thread false cypress or the gold mop cypress. They grow in a very kind of graceful arching growth habit. Look at that, like a cascading waterfall. And it likes full sun. It's going to get this best golden color in full sun. If you have it in more shade, it'll look a bit more green, sort of what you see on the underside of the foliage. And they're relatively compact, 3 to 5 feet in height, 2 to 4 feet in width. And anytime that you see a size on a tag, that is the average 10-year garden size. Any plant that is happy will continue to grow beyond what it says over time. And it is hardy down to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Did you know that Lowe's sells concrete statuary? They do. They have some bird baths as well as some planters. Sometimes they even have benches and other decorative garden pieces. But $52.98 will get you both the pedestal and the bowl, and they have several different designs. I actually purchased one here a few years ago, and it's holding up really well. I do take the bowl off for the winter and tip it on its side so that it doesn't hold water and crack with the freeze-thaw cycle. But for a concrete piece, $52.98. And they also also have some really large concrete planters for $84.98. They do have a drain hole in the center on these, and they have some of these turtles on this side as well. And they also have some decorative urn planters that are pretty good size. They're pretty substantial. They look kind of stately here. $89.98 for these, and they also have a drain hole. I found a price on the cute concrete turtles. They're $37.98 each. A couple of weeks ago when we were at Lowe's, they had some special buy shrubs for $8.98 and $9.98, and they have a couple of new varieties this time around. And these are some spring flowering shrubs. This is a type of rhododendron. It is called Pioneer Silvery Pink Rhododendron. The foliage and the bloom buds are a lot smaller than some of the big leaf rhododendrons, but it has a really pretty light pink bloom. It blooms in spring, and it gets to be 4 to 5 feet in height, 4 to 5 feet in width, hardy to a zone 5 or negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, rhododendrons, azaleas, they are understory shrubs. They like to be planted under the canopy of larger trees where they'll get some shade. So if they are going to get sun, you want to give them anywhere from 3 to 4 hours of morning sun. Up to 6 hours is okay. And I also find that deer like to eat these buds, especially as they start to swell and get ready to bloom now in the spring. So if you deal with deer, go ahead and spray your rhododendron buds to keep them safe. But $8.98 for this shrub, which is a really great buy. Here are some of the larger or big leaf rhododendrons, and you can see how large and juicy these buds look, which will provide a beautiful show this spring once it starts going. So this is called the Chinoides rhododendron. It looks like a white variety. It blooms in spring, $39.98, and these are also evergreen. So all year round, they hold on to these broad, shiny green leaves, which is excellent. And this variety gets to be, let's see, 4 to 6 feet in height and in width, and it's hardy down to zone 5 or negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. We also have the Rosum elegans, which is the most traditional variety that you're going to find with these large purpley pink blooms. Look at that. These can get quite large, but it takes a really long time. I find that they are pretty slow growers. And this variety gets to be 8 feet in height, 10 feet in width, hardy to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Also $39.98. And some lilacs, a quintessential spring shrub with a wonderful fragrance. This variety is the Miss Kim lilac. It's relatively compact compared to some of the older, larger varieties. The Miss Kim gets to be 6 to 7 feet tall and wide. I actually have one of these in my garden. I find that the blooms are a very pale shade of purple, almost white, and they smell amazing. They're also pretty large, I find, the blooms. And in the fall, the foliage will turn burgundy, so you even get some fall interest with this shrub. And these here are $34.98, and they're in a 2.33 gallon container. They do like full sun, and they're hardy down to a zone 3 or negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So very hardy. Last time we were at Lowe's, I had shown you this beautiful redbud by Bloomables. It's called the Flamethrower Eastern Redbud. Redbuds are native. They are beautiful because they get the most gorgeous light purple pink blooms in the spring, but they also have these really interesting heart-shaped leaves. And this variety, the Flamethrower, the foliage is changing. It's colorful. It is red and orange and chartreuse green and yellow. Just really pretty. It is a medium-sized tree, getting to be 15 to 20 feet in height and up to 15 feet in width, and hardy in zones 5 through 9. Now here at Lowe's, it is in a 4.5 gallon container for $119. But I did find some at the Home Depot last week for somewhere around $52. I believe the size might have been slightly smaller, but it was definitely half the price. So if you're looking for a Flamethrower redbud, check both Home Depot and Lowe's to see where you can luck out. If you've been around for a little while, you know that I love a good evergreen. And last time I was at Lowe's, I actually picked up one of these, the Hollywood Juniper. I love that it has this kind of funky, irregular shape, and it would look great as a specimen or standalone evergreen. It likes full sun. Because it's a juniper, it's going to be pretty drought tolerant once it's established, and also deer resistant because the deer don't like the feel and texture of juniper. $28.98 for this, and it is hardy to a zone 5 or down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And it has an average mature size of 15 feet in height and 10 feet in width. And here are some more of those special buy shrubs for $8.98. These are the little giant arborvitae, and if they're anything like the green giant arborvitae, they are going to be more deer resistant. And this is another one of those evergreen shrubs that grow in a ball or sphere shape, and they won't require any pruning. So $8.98, it is hardy to a zone 3 or down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it has an average size of 4 by 4 in height and in width. If you're looking to use boxwood to do any kind of hedging project this spring, they also have some boxwood in a special buy container for $9.98. This is the Green Mountain variety, and the Green Mountain gets to be, let's see, 4 to 5 feet in height, 2 to 3 feet in width, so it is great for hedging, and hardy down to a zone 5 or -10 degrees Fahrenheit. And the great thing about boxwood is not only are they deer resistant, but they're one of the few evergreens that can grow in a part sun or even a shade situation. If they get more shade, it'll just slow down their growth a little bit. But great price on these for the Green Mountain boxwood. And some beautiful roses. These are by Bloomables, and this is a popular variety called Parfuma Bliss. It has the prettiest, like, light peach apricot bloom, so frilly and so many petals. And what's better than a fragrant rose? Look how gorgeous that is. It's a hybrid tea rose, and all roses are going to want to be grown the same way in full sun with a really well-draining soil. This variety gets to be about 3 feet in height, 2 feet in width, and the flower colors are creamy pink, and it has a vanilla apricot fragrance. And these are in a, it looks like 2-gallon container for $28.98. And if you like a traditional red rose, they also have this one called Sweet Spirit. Has a strong sweet fragrance, blooms all season long, and it is cherry red. It's a grandiflora rose, and it gets to be 3 to 4 feet in height and 3 feet in width. And a yellow rose by Bloomables called Smiley Face. What a great name. And it is a bright yellow rose, a climbing rose, getting to be 12 feet in height and 4 feet in width. And one of the earliest blooming spring shrubs, the Forsythia. Now this is a great variety by proven winners called the Show Off, and it stays relatively compact compared to some of the older varieties like the Linwood Gold, which can get 10 to 12 feet tall and wide. So the Show Off Forsythia is deer proof, and it gets to be 5 to 6 feet tall and wide. It is hardy in USDA growing zones 5 through 8 or down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is a part sun to sun shrub at 4 to 6 hours of sun per day, with very early spring flowers and abundant blooms. This is a really pretty variety. Look at that. And these are in a 1-gallon container for $22.98. Some more spring flowering shrubs, some azaleas that are reblooming, and some rhododendrons by proven winners. Now this is a variety that I added to my own garden last year, probably late summer, early fall, so I never got to see it bloom. So I'm really excited to see it bloom this spring because it goes through a couple of color changes, hence the name Color Wheel. So the Dandy Man starts off a deep red, it looks like, then goes to pink, then finally turns bright white. And it is hardy in USDA growing zones 5 through 9 or down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it gets to be 4 to 8 feet tall and wide. It is evergreen, and it likes a, I would say, part sun to part shade location. But look how large these buds are. I can't wait to see it bloom this year. I'm really excited about it. And this one here is in a number 2-gallon container for $36.98. You might be familiar with the Encore azaleas, which is a type of azalea that will rebloom throughout the season versus just in spring, which is how most azaleas bloom. But this variety by proven winners is also a reblooming azalea. It's called Perfectamundo Double Purple, and it has really pretty large purple blooms. It wants 4 to 6 hours of sun, so part shade, part sun type plant, and it is hardy in USDA growing zones 5B through 9 or down to -15 degrees Fahrenheit. Very compact, only gets to be 2.5 to 3 feet in height and 3 to 4 feet in width, and it is a reblooming variety. It also has evergreen foliage and spring blooms. Really pretty, and even this darkish kind of green foliage is really interesting. And these are in a 2-gallon container, almost 2 gallons, for $29.98. And the petunias are in here at Lowe's. Now you might be thinking that petunias are summer blooming annuals, and they are, but they can actually tolerate some pretty cool temperatures, which is why they start showing up at the nurseries in spring. This is a really pretty pink one with some darker pink veining in the center. They also have some that are sort of in a salmon color like you see here. And they have red and white and even some violet purple and some really bright, like a fuchsia purple up at the top. So 8-pack of annuals, $3.98. Not a bad price for these petunias. And some of the ready fill containers that you just bring home and drop into your 10 to 12 inch planters and you are good to go. They are $16.98, and you can see they have a Dracaena spike in the center and they are planted up with different colors of pretty spring pansies. So this one has some white and some purples. They also have some with some oranges and some yellows. It's $5.98 for this dahlia and this bright red. I would certainly be cautious about buying some of these warm weather annuals at this point in the spring. Here in the Northeast, it's still pretty chilly in April to put these outside, so you'd have to protect them until the weather stabilizes and we don't get any more chance of frost. So we're probably about a month out from that here in southern New England, but some red dahlias, and they also have some pretty pink ones. Lots of spring blooming flowering trees, some weeping cherries. These are going to burst into bloom in the next month or so and be absolutely gorgeous. Now, these are some pretty big ones here at Lowe's for $169. You can see that the caliper is about 1.5 to 2 inches on some of these. So a great pickup. At this price, you're getting a pretty mature tree. And of course, they have lots of fruit trees still available. Don't forget, if you buy some like apples or even cherries, you usually need at least 2 so that they can pollinate one another and you'll get some fruit set. But there are some like peaches that you only need a single and they will still produce fruit. Here is the tag for the Weeping Snow Fountain Cherry. That is stunning. So this one has some white blooms on it, and it is a feature tree. It kind of grows in that fountain shape, and it gets to be 12 feet in height, 20 feet in width. So they're certainly wider than they are tall, and they're hardy to a zone 5 down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. And Lowe's always has such a beautiful selection of Monrovia shrubs. Now, you don't typically find Monrovia at Home Depot. They carry mostly proven winners and the first edition shrubs, as well as their own house brand. But here at Lowe's, they always have such beautiful specimens of Monrovia. Now, I have gotten comments before about how the price point is a little bit higher, and that is true because Monrovia is a premium brand. They have some pretty specimens, but also here in the Northeast, these shrubs are coming from California, so they're coming cross country. So you'll also pay a little bit more for that, right? Transportation costs. But let's look at a few of these really pretty varieties, starting with this gorgeous coral bark maple. Look at this really bright red bark. Now, this in the winter is stunning to provide winter interest in the landscape. It's also known as the Sangu Kaku Japanese maple. And in the spring, when it leaves out, it has this really pretty spring green foliage color that will sometimes get a bit more chartreuse and yellow, really beautiful. And it does like part shade. Japanese maples in general are a medium-sized tree. So this one here gets to be 15 to 25 feet in height, 15 to 20 feet in width, and it is hardy in zones 5 through 8. $179 for this one. And a cute concrete bunny. These are part of their statuary that we looked at earlier, $27.98 in this tan color. These are the only kind of bunnies I like to see in my garden. But you can see that they're flanked by some of these Japanese purus or andrometer. These are great, really early spring blooming shrubs. I have a variety called Impish Elf in my garden that is by Monrovia, and it's pretty compact, only gets 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, and it's in bloom right now in a light pink color. But this one is really interesting because it has this variegated foliage and also some rose pink blooms. So this one is called the Passion Party Passion Frost Purus. They like part sun, so mine is in a part sun, part shade kind of woodland area. They also like acidic soil. So if you fertilize them with something like a holly tone after they're done blooming in the spring, that will set them up to set blooms for next year's bloom show. And they are early blooming, so very late winter, early spring, they will start to bloom, depending where you are. Hardy in zones 5 through 8 or down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And this variety is compact, slowly reaching 4 to 5 feet in height and 2 to 3 feet in width. That is really pretty. You can see they have these tiny little bell-shaped blooms. And this shrub was $24.98, and it's about just under a 1-gallon container. And I absolutely love this shrub. It is so wild and cool looking. I actually have a couple in my garden. It's the whipcord arborvitae. And you can see that it is a full to part sun plant, a dramatic accent. I would say that that is true. Definitely people ask questions about it because it's so interesting looking. And $47.98 for this container. Now they stay relatively compact, about 4 to 5 feet tall and wide, pretty slow growing and hardy in zones 5 through 7 or down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. The Mugo pine, I love these. I think they're such a beautiful evergreen conifer. And if you want to ever control the size on a Mugo pine, when they start pushing out their candles in spring, all you have to do is prune those off and that will keep it more compact. So you can see how pretty those candles look in spring. This shrub is $52.98. It's easy care. It does like full sun. Most evergreens do. And it is hardy in zones 2 through 8. So super hardy, down to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. It is slow growing and it will reach 3 to 5 feet tall and 6 to 10 feet wide in about 10 years. And look at the color on this beauty. I actually picked one of these up the last visit I was here. I got a rhododendron, one of these, a couple of hellebore. I went to town. And so I have to be good today. But this is called the Feeling Sunny Deodar Cedar. It will develop a leader and grow in a pyramidal shape like you see here in the photo. And it's pretty compact, getting to be about 12 to 15 feet in height and 8 feet wide. And it does like sun in order for it to have this pretty golden color that you see here. $115 for this one, and it is hardy in zone 7 through 9 or down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. But that is such a pretty color. Look at these gorgeous hollies. So they have variegated foliage, and we can tell that this is a female because it has some red berries. And with hollies, you do need, for most varieties, to have a male and a female in order for the female plant to set berries. Even if one of your neighbors has a male holly, it will pollinate your female and you'll still get berries. But look how beautiful that contrast is. So pretty. Let's check out the variety. So this is a variegated English holly by Monrovia. It is a dramatic accent with winter berries. It likes full to part sun. $221 for these. And they get to be 15 to 20 feet tall and 8 to 12 feet wide over time. Hardy in zones 6 through 9 or down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. And some more Japanese Andromeda or Pyrrhus. This one is a white variety, and you can see these really pretty kind of cascading white bell-shaped blooms. And this one has just green foliage. There are some varieties that the new foliage will push out a bit of a pink or red coloring. And this one is called the Purity Pyrrhus. And it likes part sun, spring blooms, multi-season beauty. $52.98 for this one. And it grows to be 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is hardy in zones 5 through 8. And some Monrovia rhododendrons. I actually bought a beautiful yellow one the last time we were here. And this one is called the Holden's Pink Flare. Kind of reminds me of the Proven Winners Dandy Man, where it starts kind of like a deep red, then goes pink and then white. Look how beautiful that is. So this one, the Holden's Pink Flare Rhododendron, likes part sun, woodland gardens, so under the canopy of other larger trees for some shade. And it is hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit or zone 5 through 8. And it reaches 3 to 4 feet tall and wide in 8 years and up to 6 feet wide with age. So these grow slowly, but over time they can get some pretty good size on them. $46.98 for this one here. They also have some of these 3-quart ready-fill containers for $10.98, so they're a little bit smaller. They are perfect for an 8 to 10 inch planter. And these are spring annuals. They have pansies in them. Now pansies can sometimes go for a really long time. Even when it starts to warm up, if you put them in some shade and keep them a little bit cooler, you can get them to bloom probably into the summer. And if you can keep them alive, they will come back in fall if you just keep them watered and in a cool, shady spot. Such beautiful color on these, isn't it? And some 12-pack of annuals. These are some marigolds for $13.98. Now marigolds are a little bit more sensitive to cold, so these are not ones that I would actually put out right now if you're still having unstable temperatures. Maybe hold off a little bit on these, but $13.98 for a 12-pack, that's just about $1 a piece, so not a bad price. And some more cool weather annuals by proven winners in their quart-sized containers. This is Nemesia, and they actually smell really good. So they have these here in shades of pink and orange that are really pretty. And then they also have some in shades of yellow that are also really cheerful. The ivory halo dogwoods are starting to leaf out. The last time we were here, we were talking about how the burgundy twigs provided a lot of winter interest. But what was cool about the ivory halo was that they also had variegated foliage. And you can see now that the foliage is starting to leaf out, that it's green in the center with a creamy outer margin, which is a really nice contrast to those red twigs. And this one here, the ivory halo dogwood by Monrovia, likes full to part sun, has dramatic foliage, multi-season beauty, 5598. And it gets to be, it's pretty compact, about 5 to 6 feet tall and wide in rounded form. Hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit and in zones 3 through 7. They do get blooms. They're kind of tiny and insignificant, but they're a little tiny cluster of white blooms. You mostly grow it for the winter interest on the twigs as well as this really pretty variegated foliage. And check out this primula or primrose. They actually look like little red roses. Such a pretty variety. I admire it every year. While I'm not a huge fan of red in the garden, I have come to appreciate it more over recent years. So this one is the Ballerina Valentine Primrose, and I say that that is a very appropriate name. Look how beautiful that foliage is. So nice and healthy. And it is a perennial. It likes part sun, 1098 for these by Monrovia. And they stay pretty compact. Let's check out the size on them. So 6 to 12 inches, tall and wide, and hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. They prefer a part sun location, so 3 to 6 hours of morning sun with semi-moist but well-draining soil. And they bloom in spring. Well, that brings us to the end of the April inventory here at Lowe's. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these plants in deals near you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.